Hello and welcome to this Literature Revision System lesson on Thomas Hardy's poem Neutral Tones for AQA GCSE Literature. This is one of a series of presentations that will prepare you for the Love and Relationships poetry question. Okay, as always, we'll begin with some points about context. So this poem is typical of Hardy's work. It conveys a pessimistic idea of love and relationships. Hardy's writing often conveyed that negative, pessimistic view. It was written around the time that Hardy broke off an engagement. Around about 1867 it was written. He subsequently struggled to make relationships work in his life and was said to have had unhappy marriages, so it reflects his own personal misfortune in love and relationships. It uses a technique common to Hardy's work, uses memory of time and place, in this case a pond, as a symbol. This was a common motif in his writing and had been used by the Romantic poets that he admired, poets such as Wordsworth. So it sets his writing, this poem, in the context of the great tradition of Romantic poetry. Okay, the poem. We stood by a pond that winter day, and the sun was white as though chidden of God, and a few leaves lay on the starving sod. They had fallen from an ash and were grey. Your eyes on me were as eyes that rove over tedious riddles of years ago, and some words played between us to and fro, on which lost the more by our love. The smile on your mouth was the deadest thing alive, enough to have strength to die, and a grin of bitterness swept thereby like an ominous bird a-wing. Since then, keen lessons that love deceives and rings with wrong have shaped to me your face, and the God-cursed sun, and a tree, and a pond edged with greyish leaves. So to summarise the content, the story of the poem, he describes a pond on a grey winter's day. It seems lifeless. He remembers how a relationship ended there. He describes the bitterness of the woman. The lifeless, depressing mood of that place and that day seems to have changed his ability to love anyone at all since then. So it is very negative, isn't it? Very pessimistic about love and about human relationships. It's not a view to be recommended. So as always, we're going to focus on three key ideas for this literature revision system: the beginning, the middle and end. And I've highlighted those in yellow, blue and green for you. It would be useful, as always, to make notes in your own anthology, highlight those quotations and use the annotations around the poem as the basis for your own notes. By using these keywords, it will start to make you familiar with these analyses, and if the vocabulary is challenging for you or new to you, remember on the Literature Revision System's website there are some lessons, vocabulary lessons, one for each of the poems that you can access that will help support your learning of this new vocab. Okay, so let's look at the ideas highlighted in yellow there. The first paragraph of analysis will focus on this semantic field, this group of words that create this very neutral colour scheme of white, ash and grey. And it links to the neutral tones of the title. So Hardy's describing this typical greyish autumn day, this autumnal scene. And that colourless semantic field acts as a pathetic fallacy. The weather is a symbol of the emotions, the lack of emotions, the lack of love. It suggests that kind of emotional loss, the emotional detachment, loneliness. The neutral descriptions also suggest that the place has no life in it. It's lifeless, it's indifferent. It doesn't care about the speaker's emotional pain. The world does not care about love, and therefore love has no meaning. It reflects the speaker's dejection at the end of his love affair. Life itself seems empty, bland. He feels uninterested, apathetic. So a very sombre start. So if you'd like to pause this to carry on making notes, please do. We're going to move on to the second paragraph of analysis now. And it describes the couple by the pond. And we use these, Hardy uses these paradoxical images of, dead, alive, grin, bitterness. They are contradictory images, opposing images, and they kind of suggest this sense of frustration and resentment at the end of their love affair. The paradoxical phrase, grin of bitterness, suggests that they're disappointed. Affection's been replaced by resentment, and that image of the deadest thing alive suggests that the world there seems a sense of overwhelming loss, really. The poem actually seems more negative, doesn't it, than neutral. Simply, Hardy might be suggesting that love is more trouble than it's worth, he feels. Losing this love has made him feel apathetic about life itself. Okay, the final point, we're going to look at the last line, a pond edged with greyish leaves. And as you can see, I've connected that to the beginning. He begins by describing the pond and then ends with the pond. And so we get what's called a cyclical structure. We end as we begin, so it creates a sense of completion. But in this case, perhaps it gives us a sense that Hardy may be trapped by the misery of the end of this affair. A sense that perhaps this doomed relationship will continue to stay with him, to haunt him. The indefinite article is interesting. So rather than refer to this pond as the pond, he uses the indefinite article a. And that creates quite an objective tone. The place has no significance. It's not a particular place. And it suggests he's emotionally disengaged from the world, perhaps, not just this place itself. Another idea that reinforces this sense of the place having no significance and the world having lost its significance for him is the suffix ish on the colour grey. It's so bland that it can't even be described as truly grey. It's greyish. So this together suggests that falling out of love has maybe damaged the speaker's ability to feel emotion, powerful emotion at least. Life has lost its colours, it's lost its lustre, and will seem like his emotions now neutral. So those are the three areas that we're going to analyse. So as always, we're going to be using this consistent pattern for our analysis that maps to the mark scheme that the examiner will have as a checklist. The examiner wants you to contextualise the quotes, to use quotations in evidence, to use subject terminology accurately, to analyse and develop analysis, and then to link ideas together or compare to another poem. And remembering this process, this framework for our writing, will help us pick up marks. So let's see how that would look for these first notes that we made on the semantic field in the first verse, white, ash and grey. He begins with a description of an insipid autumnal scene. The neutral tones of the title are reflected in the colourless semantic field of white, ash and grey. This acts as a pathetic fallacy to convey emotional detachment and loneliness. These neutral descriptions suggest the world's indifference to the speaker's emotional pain. It also reflects the speaker's dejection at the end of his love affair. He has become apathetic and life seems bland. So here I've highlighted in different colours the different stages of that petal analysis, point, evidence, technique, analysis and link. And you can see that this together builds into a thoughtful examination of the way that Hardy uses language. Okay, now the ebook that you can access via the link below will present a series of exercises to help you become familiar and to learn this process, and it breaks the stages of that petal analysis down into a chart format, which gives you a step-by-step way to learn the analysis. So please access the link below to find those exercises. The essays, however, are not just single text analyses. It's a comparative task where you compare any two poems, one that's printed in the exam paper to one of your choice. Now, as the love and relationships poems divide into two neat thematic groups, romantic love, family relationship, if you've seen previous lessons, you'll know that I'm suggesting you focus on I Think of Thee for the romantic poem connections and comparisons. So A possible essay comparing I think of thee and neutral tones might begin like this. Both I think of thee and neutral tones were written to describe how romantic love changes the way you feel about life. However, in her sonnet, Browning celebrates the joy of falling in love, whereas Hardy conveys the misery of the end of a love affair. So, a very simple two-sentence introduction that immediately establishes for the examiner that this is a comparative response, so you're picking up marks for that. We've got our first sentence finding a link between the poems, how they have similar effects, and then we've gone into the differences between them. So it will instantly be picking you up marks within the first 20-30 seconds of the examiner reading your response. Okay. The ebook, as mentioned, has a series of exercises to support your understanding of a grade 7 response, grade 8, grade 9. As you can see, we're focusing on sonnet 29 in our grade 7 response and building in just one detailed link to neutral tones. Of course, beginning with that comparative introduction, so we frame the essay as a comparative response. Remember, you don't need to write both poems equally to be able to attain grades in that level 5 of the mark scheme. The grade 8 is a step up from that as we build in one other comparison to neutral tones, and then finally grade 9 we get a really detailed integrated comparison. But by working through the exercises from grade 7 to 8, the core of the essay, the grade 7 essay, is still there, and you're building in more complexity at each stage, and the workbook will take you through those stages so that you can become confident you can master a grade 9 response. All resources are in that you can access via the Literature Revision Systems website, the links below. Okay, if you found this useful, please like, but be sure to check the next lessons and the previous lessons. Thanks for attending Literature Revision Systems.